June 18, 1945. 3:30 p.m. The White House. President Harry S. Truman sits at the head of a polished oak table in the cabinet room. Across from him, Secretary of War Henry Stimson, General George Marshall, Admiral Ernest King, General Ira Eaker, Admiral William Leahy, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the men who run America's war machine. On the table between them sits a leather-bound folder marked Top Secret. Inside, invasion plans requiring 1,700,000 American troops. The largest amphibious assault in human history. Bigger than D-Day. Bigger than anything ever attempted. General Marshall opens the folder, begins reading casualty estimates aloud. His voice is steady. Professional. The numbers are not. The math is impossible. The decision is unavoidable. Someone in this room is about to authorize an operation that will kill hundreds of thousands of Americans. And everyone at this table knows it. The war in Europe ended 6 weeks ago, May 8, 1945. Victory in Europe Day, and celebrations in Times Square, London, Paris. Soldiers kissing nurses, champagne bottles emptied into gutters, Hitler dead in his bunker. The Third Reich collapsed. Germany surrendered unconditionally. Europe is done. But the war isn't over, because Japan refuses to surrender. 3 months earlier, the Allies issued the Potsdam Declaration. Terms were clear: unconditional surrender or total destruction. Japan's response: silence. Then, rejection. Prime Minister Suzuki called it unworthy of public notice. The Japanese government publicly stated it would fight on. So the war continues, and American boys keep dying. Okinawa just ended 12 days ago. June 22, 1945. 82 days of combat. The bloodiest battle of the Pacific War. 12,520 Americans killed. 38,916 wounded. 26,211 non-battle casualties, mostly combat fatigue and shell shock. Men who simply broke under the strain. Total, 49,151 American casualties. 35% of the invasion force. More Americans died on Okinawa than in the entire European theater up to D-Day. And Okinawa is just one island, 60 miles long, 15 miles wide, 450 square miles of limestone ridges and coral caves. Japan has 4 main islands, combined area, 145,000 square miles. If Okinawa is the template, the math is terrifying. Truman has been president for 10 weeks. Franklin Roosevelt died April 12, 1945. Cerebral hemorrhage at Warm Springs, Georgia. Truman was vice president for 82 days before being sworn in. Roosevelt never briefed him on the war, never told him about the Manhattan Project, never prepared him for this. Now Truman sits across from generals and admirals who've been planning this war for 4 years. Men who fought across North Africa, Italy, France, the Pacific. Men who've seen more death than any human should. And they're telling him the next phase will be worse than everything that came before. He's about to make the deadliest decision any American president has ever faced. Marshall speaks first. His estimate is based on casualty ratios from Luzon in the Philippines. American forces invaded Luzon in January 1945. Combat lasted 6 months. Casualties ran approximately 4% per month. Apply that ratio to the planned invasion of Japan. 31,000 American casualties in the first 30 days. Admiral King disagrees. The Navy's estimate is higher. Naval operations are studying Okinawa's numbers, the 35% casualty rate. They're calculating what happens when you scale that to a force of 1.7 million men. King's estimate, 49,000 American casualties in the first 30 days. Just the opening month. But the invasion won't last a month. The Joint Chiefs are planning for a campaign lasting 18 months. 2 separate landings. Southern Japan first, then Tokyo. The staff planners have run the numbers. They've studied every amphibious assault from Tarawa to Okinawa. They've built statistical models. They've consulted actuarial tables, like insurance adjusters calculating death benefits. First phase, Operation Olympic, invasion of Kyushu, 456,000 American casualties. Of those, 267,000 will be killed or missing. Second phase, Operation Coronet, invasion of Honshu and Tokyo, another 720,000 casualties. Combined total, 1.2 million American casualties, over 400,000 dead. That's the conservative estimate, the optimistic one. Other projections run higher, much higher. Some staff officers are whispering numbers that seem impossible. 1.7 million casualties, 2 million, even 4 million in worst-case scenarios if the Japanese resistance proves as fanatical on the home islands as it was on Okinawa. American deaths, somewhere between 400,000 and 800,000 killed. And Japanese casualties, the estimates are apocalyptic. 5 million dead, 10 million, maybe more. Military and civilian combined, because the Japanese aren't planning to evacuate civilians. They're planning to arm them. Truman asks the question that's been hanging over the room since the meeting started. Is there any alternative? The silence stretches. But there's something else in that room, something nobody's talking about yet. A physical artifact that tells the real story, evidence of what the military actually expects. In early 1945, the War Department placed an order with the Philadelphia Quartermaster Depot, an order for Purple Heart medals, the decoration awarded to American service members wounded or killed in combat. The order was for 1,506,000 Purple Hearts. Read that number again, 1.5 million. Enough medals for an invasion so catastrophically bloody it would continue into 1947. Enough for casualty rates that would dwarf anything in American military history. Enough to decorate the graves and hospital beds of an entire generation. The medals were manufactured, struck from metal, placed in presentation cases, stored in warehouses, ready for distribution. When the war ended in August 1945, $495,000 Purple Hearts remained in storage. Nearly 500,000 medals that never had to be awarded. Soldiers who never had to bleed. Families who never had to grieve. Those 495,000 medals have been awarded to every American wounded in combat since 1945. Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, the Gulf War, Somalia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan. 80 years of American conflicts, 80 years of casualties. And we're still using Purple Hearts manufactured for an invasion that never happened. A Marine wounded in Fallujah in 2004 might receive a Purple Heart struck in 1945 for the invasion of Japan. A soldier injured in Kandahar in 2011 could be wearing a medal made for a beach landing at Kyushu that never came. The medals sit in storage facilities, climate-controlled warehouses, cardboard boxes stacked on industrial shelving. Each box contains dozens of Purple Hearts. Each medal represents a wound that was expected, a casualty that was planned for, a sacrifice that was considered acceptable. The year 2000 thus was the first time the military ordered new Purple Hearts since 1945. Only 120,000 were made. The 1945 supply still hasn't run out. That's how many casualties they expected. That's how bad they knew it would be. The invasion has a name, Operation Downfall. It has two parts, Olympic and Coronet. Two massive amphibious assaults, two separate invasions, each larger than D-Day. X-Day is November 1st, 1945, 5 months away. The day 767,000 American troops will hit the beaches of Kyushu. Y-Day is March 1st, 1946. The day another 1 million Americans will assault the beaches near Tokyo. The planning is meticulous. The preparation is exhaustive. Ships are being loaded. Aircraft are being positioned. Divisions are training for beach assaults. Everything is in motion. and the Japanese know exactly where we're coming. Japan's geography makes the invasion predictable. There are only a few suitable landing beaches, only a few approaches that can support an amphibious force of this size. The Japanese have known since April exactly where the Americans will land. They've been preparing since then, fortifying, digging, training, mobilizing. And what they're planning is worse than anything the Americans can imagine. November 1st, around 1845, X-Day. The code name is Operation Olympic. The target, Kyushu, the southernmost of Japan's 4 main islands. The mission, establish air bases and staging areas for the final assault on Tokyo. 14 divisions, 767,000 American troops. The 6th Army under General Walter Kruger. 3 corps landing simultaneously on 3 separate beaches along Kyushu's southern and western coasts. The naval armada is unprecedented. 42 aircraft carriers, 24 battleships, 400 destroyers and destroyer escorts. The British Pacific Fleet adds another 4 battleships and 18 carriers. More than 3,000 ships total, enough to cover the horizon from shore to shore. The landing beaches have names pulled from American automobiles. Chevrolet Beach, Ford Beach, Buick Beach, Cadillac Beach, as if branding them with pieces of home might make the slaughter more bearable. The invasion plan calls for 3 amphibious corps to hit the beaches at dawn. I Corps lands near Miyazaki on the eastern coast. 11 Corps lands at Ariake Bay in the south. V Amphibious Corps strikes Kushikino on the western shore. The 3 forces converge inland, squeezing Japanese defenders into a pocket. Air support is total. The 20th Air Force commits every B-29 bomber available. The 8th Air Force, fresh from pulverizing German cities, redeploys to the Pacific. Tactical air wings from 16 aircraft carriers. The plan calls for bombing missions every day for 90 days. 3 months of sustained aerial bombardment while ground forces push north. The objective isn't to capture all of Kyushu, just the southern third. Enough territory to build air bases, enough ports to supply the next phase, enough real estate to stage 1 million more troops for the assault on Tokyo. Timeline, 90 days of combat. 3 months from X-Day to mission complete. That's the official estimate, the optimistic one. Nobody believes it. March 1st, 1946, Y-Day. 4 months after Olympic. Operation Coronet, the main event. The reason Olympic exists. The invasion that will end the war. Target, the Kanto Plain, Tokyo, the industrial heart of Japan, the seat of the emperor. The final objective, 25 divisions. More than 1 million American troops. The 1st Army and 8th Army. General Douglas MacArthur commanding the entire operation. The Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers personally overseeing the largest amphibious assault in human history. Larger than D-Day, larger than Olympic, larger than anything ever attempted in warfare. 2 landing zones. The 1st Army hits Sagami Bay, southwest of Tokyo. The 8th Army lands at Kujikuri Beach, 40 miles east of the capital. 2 massive pincers closing on Tokyo from opposite directions. If everything goes according to plan, they link up within 2 weeks. The invasion force would use the air bases captured on Kyushu. Bombers and fighters based 400 miles south, within easy striking distance of Tokyo. Naval gunfire from battleships parked in Tokyo Bay. Artillery positioned on captured high ground. Everything coordinated to support the ground assault. The mission: fight block by block through Tokyo. Capture the Imperial Palace. Force unconditional Japanese surrender. End the war. Estimated completion date: mid-1947. 18 months after X-Day. A year and a half of sustained combat operations. That's what the Joint Chiefs are planning for. That's what the logistics trains are organized to support. But there's a problem. Actually, several problems. And every single one of them makes the invasion exponentially worse. Japan's geography is the first problem. An island nation has limited landing sites. You need beaches capable of handling landing craft. You need terrain that allows rapid inland movement. You need proximity to strategic objectives. You need all three simultaneously. Japan has exactly 2 locations that meet these requirements. Southern Kyushu for Olympic, the Kanto Plain for Coronet. That's it. No alternatives, no backup options. The Japanese military figured this out in April 1945, 5 months before X-Day. They know exactly where the Americans are coming. They've known for months. There is no element of surprise. None. The fundamental advantage of amphibious warfare, hitting the enemy where they're weak, where they don't expect you, is gone. The Japanese can concentrate every division, every gun, every fortification at precisely the locations where Americans will land. They've had months to prepare, months to dig, months to fortify. And the terrain favors defense at every level. Kyushu is mountainous. Volcanic peaks and limestone ridges. Rice paddies in the lowlands flood easily, channeling attackers into kill zones. The few roads inland run through narrow valleys perfect for ambushes. Every ridgeline is a defensive position. Every cave is a bunker. The Kanto Plain is worse. Tokyo sprawls across flat ground, but it's surrounded by high ground. Attackers advancing from the beaches would be moving uphill into prepared positions. Urban combat through a city of 6 million people. Every building is a fortress. Every basement is a fighting position. Every sewer tunnel is a defensive network. The Americans would be attacking uphill, into prepared defenses, against an enemy that knows exactly where they're coming, with no room to maneuver around strong points. Every single advantage belongs to the defenders. And then the intelligence reports started coming in. The Americans have Ultra. British codebreakers cracked Japanese military communications in 1942. Every major Japanese order, every troop movement, every strategic decision, the Americans know about it within hours. Ultra intercepts track Japanese defensive preparations in real time. And what those intercepts reveal is terrifying. June 18th, 1945. The day of Truman's meeting with the Joint Chiefs. Intelligence estimates 350,000 Japanese troops on Kyushu. That gives the Americans better than 2-to-1 numerical advantage. Acceptable odds for an amphibious assault. July 1945. New Ultra decrypts. Revised estimate, 545,000 Japanese troops on Kyushu. The advantage shrinks. August 1945. More intercepts. The number climbs to 680,000, then 750,000, then 900,000. 900,000 Japanese soldiers on Kyushu alone. Dug in, fortified, waiting. The invasion ratio flipped. 3-to-1 American advantage became near parity. In some landing zones, the Japanese would actually outnumber the attackers. General Marshall requested updated casualty estimates. Admiral King demanded a strategic review. Even Douglas MacArthur, who never met a battle he thought he couldn't win, started expressing doubts about Olympics' viability. The intelligence was clear. Japan wasn't just defending Kyushu. They were mobilizing everything. Every reserve division, every garrison unit, every training battalion. Stripping forces from Manchuria, Korea, China, pulling them back to the home islands. They were preparing for Armageddon. 900,000 Japanese soldiers on Kyushu alone. But soldiers aren't the worst part. Because the Japanese military has a plan. Operation Ketsugo. Decisive operation. The final defense of the homeland. And it doesn't just involve soldiers. It involves every man, woman, and child in Japan.
January 20th, 1945. Emperor Hirohito approves Operation Ketsugo. The name translates to Decisive Operation, the final defense of the Japanese homeland. the plan that will determine whether Japan survives as a nation or ceases to exist. Implementation begins April 8, 1945. Every military district receives the same orders. Every division commander gets the same directive. Every soldier hears the same message: fight to utter annihilation. The strategy is simple: kill as many Americans as possible. The cost doesn't matter. Japanese casualties are irrelevant. Survival is irrelevant. The only objective is to make the invasion so catastrophically expensive that America loses the will to continue. Break them, bleed them, making every yard of Japanese soil cost 100 American lives. Force a negotiated peace. Avoid unconditional surrender. Preserve the imperial system. Save the emperor. That's the goal. Everything else is sacrifice. No retreat. No surrender. No mercy. Every division is ordered to fight until destroyed. When ammunition runs out, use bayonets. When bayonets break, use rocks. When rocks are gone, use your hands. Die in place. Take as many Americans with you as possible. The Imperial Japanese Army has 2.3 million soldiers in the home islands. Under Ketsugo, every single one will fight to the death. But 2.3 million soldiers isn't enough. Not for the defense the Japanese are planning. So they expand the definition of soldier. June 1945. The Japanese government issues the Volunteer Military Service Law. 28 million civilians are organized into the National Volunteer Fighting Corps, Kokumin Giyu Sentotai, the People's Volunteer Combat Force. All males aged 15 to 60, all females aged 17 to 40. Mandatory participation. No exceptions. 28 million civilians, armed, organized into units, assigned to defensive sectors, expected to fight alongside regular military forces when the Americans land. The training begins in schools. Japanese soldiers teach children how to kill. High school gymnasiums become combat instruction centers. Schoolyards become weapons ranges. The weapons are primitive. There aren't enough rifles. There isn't enough ammunition. So the Volunteer Fighting Corps gets what's available. Bamboo spears, sharpened poles, 8 feet long, cheap to manufacture, easy to distribute, millions produced. Awls, steel spikes with wooden handles. Issue one to every person. Instructions: thrust upward into the abdomen. Twist. Withdraw. Move to next target. Kitchen knives, farming sickles, wood-cutting axes, sharpened bamboo stakes, anything with a blade or a point. Molotov cocktails, bottles filled with gasoline, rags soaked in oil, light and throw. Training films show women hurling firebombs at American tanks, lunge mines, pole-mounted explosive charges. Run at the enemy. Detonate on contact. Suicide weapons for civilians. 1 rifle for every 10 people. Maybe, if supplies last. Yukiko Kasai, a high school girl in Tokyo, receives an awl at a school assembly. The instructor, a Japanese army sergeant, demonstrates the proper grip, shows the class where to strike. Aim for the abdomen, he tells them. The Americans wear body armor on their chests, strike below the ribs. Yukiko is 16 years old. There are no evacuation plans for Japanese civilians, no designated safe zones, no open cities where non-combatants can shelter. The Japanese government makes no provision for civilians' survival, because civilians aren't supposed to survive. They're supposed to fight and die. The propaganda campaign has a name: the glorious death of 100 million. Ichioku Gyokusai, 100 million shattered jewels. The entire population of Japan sacrificed for the emperor. State radio broadcasts the message daily. Newspapers print it on front pages. Posters appear on buildings across every city. The theme is constant. Dying for the emperor is the highest honor a Japanese citizen can achieve. Americans are portrayed as monsters, white devils, subhuman barbarians who will torture, rape, and murder every Japanese citizen they encounter. Surrender means a fate worse than death. The propaganda isn't starting from scratch. There's precedent, recent precedent. Saipan, July 1944. American forces capture the island after 3 weeks of combat. More than 1,000 Japanese civilians throw themselves off cliffs rather than surrender to American forces. Mothers hold their children and jump. Families leap together. Entire communities commit mass suicide. The Japanese government films the suicides, distributes the footage as proof of Japanese spiritual superiority. The message: even our civilians prefer death to American captivity. Okinawa, April to June 1945. Japanese officers order civilians to commit suicide rather than surrender. Military police prevent civilians from approaching American lines. Soldiers distribute hand grenades to families with instructions to kill themselves when Americans arrive. Women with infants strapped to their backs, armed with bamboo spears, launch counterattacks against American positions. Not because they want to fight, because Japanese soldiers are watching, because refusing means execution. The Japanese military has no plan to save civilians during Operation Downfall, no plan to evacuate non-combatants from invasion zones, no plan to separate civilians from combat areas. The plan is for civilians to die. Millions of them die fighting Americans, die in American bombing raids, die in mass suicides when their sectors fall. The Japanese government expects this, plans for it, considers it acceptable. 28 million armed civilians, fighting to the death, taking as many Americans as possible with them. But civilians with bamboo spears aren't the worst of it. The Japanese military has assembled an arsenal of suicide weapons unlike anything in military history. 10,000 kamikaze aircraft, divine wind, pilots deliberately crashing planes into American ships. Not just fighters, everything that can fly, trainers, bombers, reconnaissance planes, cargo transports converted into flying bombs, one-way missions, no expectation of survival, no parachutes issued. Oka, cherry blossom, a piloted bomb, a rocket-powered missile with a cockpit, carried under a bomber, released near the target, then guided by a pilot directly into American ships. 755 Oka bombs produced, hundreds of pilots trained to fly them, one mission per pilot. Kaiten, heaven shaker, manned torpedoes, essentially a suicide submarine, a torpedo modified to carry a pilot, launch from a submarine or shore installation, steer directly into enemy ships, detonate on impact. Over 120 Kaiten operational by August 1945. Production ramping up, 1,000 more planned by November. Fukuryu, crouching dragon, suicide frogman, 4,000 trained, armed with 15-kilogram explosive charges attached to poles, swim underwater to American landing craft, attach charge to hull, detonate, underwater kamikaze, Kairyu, midget submarines, 2-man crew, armed with torpedoes. If torpedoes miss, ram the target, detonate internal charges, no escape mechanism. Target priority, troop transports, not warships, not carriers, not battleships. Kill the soldiers before they reach the beach. Japanese naval staff estimate they can destroy 30 to 50% of the invasion force at sea before a single American reaches shore, before the landing even begins. Hundreds of thousands of American soldiers drowned in burning transports, bodies floating in the Pacific. Entire divisions wiped out before the first shot is fired on land. That's the plan. That's Operation Ketsugo. The Japanese assessed American psychology correctly. The critical weakness, inability to sustain massive casualties. America isn't fighting for survival. America is fighting for principle, for unconditional surrender, for a political objective. And democracies don't sustain wars of attrition when casualties become unacceptable. The Japanese military understood this, studied it, built an entire defensive strategy around it. Make the invasion so bloody that America quits, force negotiations, preserve the empire. And they were right, because inside that White House meeting on June 18th, Truman made his decision clear. Admiral Leahy's notes record Truman's exact words. His intention is to make his decision with the purpose of economizing to the maximum extent possible in the loss of American lives. The economy in time and money is comparatively unimportant. American lives were the only thing that mattered. And the Japanese defensive plan was designed to take as many as possible. Admiral Ernest King has a different idea. Don't invade. Starve them out. Naval blockade. Strategic bombing. Cut off every supply line. Destroy every port. Sink every cargo ship. Bomb every rail line. Flatten every factory. Continue the firebombing campaign that's already turned 64 Japanese cities into ash. Japan is already isolated. The Imperial Navy is destroyed. Merchant marines scattered or sunk. Oil imports, zero. Steel imports, nearly zero. Food imports, minimal. Keep squeezing. Keep burning cities. Wait for collapse. King presents the proposal at the June 18th meeting. The blockade could work, he argues. Eventually. Japan's economy is already broken. Their military is running on fumes. Time is on America's side. The question is how much time? 18 months, maybe longer. Japan might hold out through 1946, maybe into 1947. The blockade isn't a quick solution. It's a siege. Medieval warfare applied to an industrial nation. Slow starvation instead of invasion. But prolonging the war has costs. 100,000 Allied prisoners of war are held in Japan. Americans, British, Australians, Dutch, men captured at Bataan, Corregidor, Singapore, Java, held in camps across the home islands, starving, diseased, dying at a rate of 3% per month. And the Japanese government has plans for them. August 1944. Japanese Vice Minister of War issues orders to all POW camp commanders. Classified directive. Instructions for when Allied forces approach the home islands. Whether they are destroyed individually or in groups, or however it is done, with mass bombing, poisonous smoke, poisons, drowning, decapitation, or what, dispose of the prisoners as the situation dictates. Kill them all. American intelligence intercepts the order. Everyone at the table knows. If the invasion happens, 100,000 Allied POWs die. But if the blockade continues for 18 months, 15,000 Americans die in captivity. Dead from starvation, disease, execution. Truman asks the question, how many Americans are worth saving if it costs other Americans their lives? No good answer exists. The blockade option is rejected. Too slow, too many POW deaths, too uncertain. Joseph Grew has spent 10 years in Japan, American ambassador to Tokyo from 1932 to 1941. He knows the culture, understands the politics, speaks Japanese fluently. He knows what matters to the Japanese government. The Emperor, May 28, 1945. Grew, now acting Secretary of State, proposes a modification to unconditional surrender. Keep the policy, keep the demand, but add one explicit guarantee. Emperor Hirohito can remain as ceremonial head of state. Don't abolish the imperial system. Don't put the emperor on trial as a war criminal. Let Japan keep the institution that defines their national identity. Grew argues this might work. The Japanese military can't accept unconditional surrender because it implies the emperor's execution. They're fighting to protect him. Remove that fear, and the die-hard militarists might accept terms. Truman is interested. He tells Grew, "My thinking runs along the same lines as yours." June 18th, the same day as the invasion meeting. Grew takes the proposal to the Pentagon, presents it to the Joint Chiefs, Secretary of War Stimson, the military leadership. They reject it unanimously. It would be interpreted as weakness. America is in the middle of the Okinawa bloodbath. 12,000 Americans dead. The bloodiest battle of the Pacific War still raging. And Grew wants to modify surrender terms. The military brass see it as capitulation, backing down, showing the Japanese that American resolve is cracking. If we modify terms now, they argue, Japan will think they can hold out for better conditions. They'll fight harder. More Americans will die. Secretary of War Stimson makes the argument explicit. The question of whether we should offer the emperor guarantees must be carefully timed. If we issue it now, Japan will think we're desperate. They'll reject it and keep fighting. We need to issue it from a position of strength, not weakness. But America isn't in a position of strength. America is planning an invasion that will cost 500,000 casualties. The proposal dies in committee. Unconditional surrender remains official policy. No negotiation, no modification, no guarantees for the emperor. Take it or face annihilation. Chemical weapons. The discussion happens behind closed doors, not in official meetings, not in formal proposals. But the conversations happen. Senior military planners quietly discussing options that can't be said aloud. Gas, mustard gas, phosgene, chlorine. Weapons that could break Japanese defensive positions. Clear caves and bunkers without sending infantry into meat grinders. Disable defenders before the landing craft hit the beaches. Or target the food supply. Spray Japanese rice paddies with chemical agents. Destroy crops. Induce famine. Force surrender through starvation. Neither the United States nor Japan signed the 1925 Geneva Protocol banning chemical weapons. Both nations stockpiled them. Japan used chemical weapons extensively in China. Documented cases in dozens of engagements. The weapons exist. The capability exists. The legal framework to use them exists. But there's a problem. Multiple problems. First, perception. Chemical weapons carry a stigma. World War I gas attacks killed 90,000 soldiers and injured over 1 million. Images of soldiers choking in trenches, lungs scarred, skin blistered. The public memory of chemical warfare is horror. Using gas against Japan, even against military targets, would be seen as barbarism. It would justify any Japanese retaliation. And Japan has chemical weapons too. If America gasses Japanese positions, Japan gasses American positions. escalation without limit. Second, effectiveness. Japanese defensive caves and bunkers are deep. Gas disperses quickly in open air. The Pacific wind patterns would blow chemical agents unpredictably. You might gas your own troops, and civilian casualties would be catastrophic. Third, the moral line. June 1945. Truman explicitly vetoes the use of gas weapons against personnel. I want you to know that I am absolutely opposed to the use of these gases in any form, he tells military planners. Chemical weapons against crops remain under consideration through June and July, starve Japan into submission. But that option carries its own horror. Millions of Japanese civilians, children, elderly, non-combatants, dead from famine. Mass starvation as military strategy. Truman won't cross that line. Chemical weapons option abandoned. Joseph Stalin has made a promise. At Yalta in February 1945, Stalin committed to entering the Pacific War. 3 months after Germany's surrender, the Soviet Union would attack Japan, strike Japanese holdings in Manchuria and Korea, open a second front, force Japan to fight on 2 fronts simultaneously. General Marshall believes Soviet entry could be decisive. Might be the action levering them into capitulation, he tells Truman. Japan can't sustain a 2-front war. Their military is already stretched defending the home islands. If the Soviets attack from the north, Japanese command structure might collapse. July 1945. Truman travels to Potsdam, Germany. The Potsdam Conference, meeting with Stalin and Churchill. The official agenda is post-war Europe. The real agenda for Truman is securing Stalin's commitment to attack Japan. Stalin confirms, August 15, 1945. Soviet forces will invade Manchuria. The date is set. But there are problems. Stalin wants payment, territorial concessions, Soviet occupation of the Kuril Islands, possibly Hokkaido, the northernmost Japanese island. Stalin wants to expand Soviet influence in the Pacific. He sees the war against Japan as an opportunity. Post-war occupation becomes complicated. If the Soviets occupy Hokkaido, Japan gets divided like Germany. Soviet zone and American zone. Cold War partition before the war even ends. And there's a bigger problem. Soviet entry might not be enough. Japanese military leadership knows the Soviets are coming. They've pulled most forces out of Manchuria already. Reposition them to defend the home islands. Soviet attacks on the mainland won't directly threaten Japan itself. The Japanese military is committed to defending the home islands regardless of what happens in Manchuria. Operation Ketsugo doesn't change if the Soviets attack. The civilian mobilization doesn't stop. The suicide weapons don't go away. Soviet entry helps, but it doesn't solve the problem. It doesn't prevent Operation Downfall. By early July 1945, every option has fatal flaws. Blockade too slow, POWs die. Negotiation seen as weakness. Military rejects it. Chemical weapons too barbaric. Truman vetoes them. Soviet entry helpful but insufficient. Invasion is the only option left. 1,700,000 American troops, 500,000 casualties, 400,000 dead, 28 million armed Japanese civilians, 10,000 kamikaze aircraft, 2 years of combat, fighting into 1947. The math is unchanging. The decision is unavoidable. Unless July 16th, 1945, 5:29 a.m. Alamogordo, New Mexico, Trinity test. The flash is visible 200 miles away. The fireball reaches 7,200 feet in diameter. The mushroom cloud climbs 40,000 feet into the atmosphere. The shockwave breaks windows 120 miles distant. The explosion is equivalent to 22,000 tons of TNT, 22 kilotons. One bomb, one blast, a crater 340 feet wide, 10 feet deep, sand fused into glass. The atomic bomb works. And suddenly, Truman has a different kind of math to consider. July 26, 1945, Potsdam, Germany. The Potsdam Declaration is issued. Allied leaders deliver Japan's final warning. The language is unambiguous. We call upon the government of Japan to proclaim now the unconditional surrender of all Japanese armed forces. The alternative for Japan is prompt and utter destruction. Prompt and utter destruction. The phrase is deliberate, carefully chosen. America now has a weapon capable of delivering exactly that. Japan's response comes quickly. July 28th. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki holds a press conference. He uses a single word to describe Japan's position on the Potsdam Declaration, mokusatsu. The word has multiple meanings. Ignore it. Treat with silent contempt. Kill it with silence. The Japanese government publicly rejects the terms. The war continues. The decision is made. August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m., Hiroshima. The Enola Gay, a B-29 superfortress, drops a single bomb, codename Little Boy, a uranium-based atomic weapon, the first nuclear weapon ever used in combat. The bomb detonates 1,900 feet above the city. The blast is equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. The fireball reaches 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything within a mile of ground zero is vaporized instantly. The shockwave flattens buildings 4 miles away. 70,000 people die immediately. Another 70,000 die from radiation and burns over the following months. Total casualties, 140,000 dead in Hiroshima. August 9th, 1945, 11:02 a.m. Nagasaki. Boxcar drops Fat Man, a plutonium bomb. The explosion is more powerful than Hiroshima, 21 kilotons. But Nagasaki's geography, hills and valleys, contains the blast. Casualties are lower. 40,000 killed instantly. Another 40,000 dead by year's end. Total, 80,000 casualties in Nagasaki. August 9th, 1945. Same day, Soviet Union invades Manchuria. 1,600,000 Soviet troops pour across the border. The Kwantung Army, Japan's force in Manchuria, collapses within days. Soviet tanks advance 600 miles in 2 weeks. Japan is now fighting a two-front war. Americans threatening from the south, Soviets attacking from the north. 2 atomic bombs dropped. No prospect of victory, no prospect of negotiated peace. August 14th, 1945. Japan surrenders unconditionally. The war is over. Operation Downfall never happened. X-Day, November 1st, 1945, came and went. No invasion. No landing craft hitting beaches at dawn. No 767,000 Americans storming Kyushu. Y-Day, March 1st, 1946, never arrived. No million-man assault on Tokyo. No 18 months of urban combat. No fighting into 1947. The 28 million Japanese civilians organized into the Volunteer Fighting Corps never fought. The bamboo spears were never used. The awls stayed in storage. High school girl Yukiko Kasai never had to aim for an American soldier's abdomen. The 10,000 kamikaze aircraft never launched their final missions. The Kaiten manned torpedoes stayed docked. The Fukuryu suicide frogmen never swam to their deaths. The Oka piloted bombs never flew, and 495,000 Purple Hearts, manufactured, boxed, stored in warehouses, were never awarded to invasion casualties. But what would have happened if the bombs hadn't worked? If Trinity had been a failure? If Truman had no alternative to invasion? The math provides answers, grim ones. Okinawa's casualty rate, 35%. Apply that to Operation Olympic's 767,000-man invasion force, 268,000 American casualties minimum. That's just the first 90 days. Just Kyushu. Just Phase 1. Japanese Ketsugo plans called for destroying 30 to 50% of the invasion force at sea. Kamikaze attacks on troop transports, suicide submarines, manned torpedoes, American soldiers drowning before reaching shore. Another 200,000 to 400,000 casualties before the landing even begins. Then Operation Coronet. Another 1 million Americans assaulting the Kanto Plain. Urban combat through Tokyo. 28 million armed civilians fighting with whatever weapons they could find. Mass civilian suicides like Saipan and Okinawa, but on a scale orders of magnitude larger. Combat lasting into 1947, possibly longer. Japan's military showing no signs of surrender. Emperor Hirohito committed to fighting. The entire nation mobilized for the glorious death of 100 million. Most historians who've studied the invasion plans agree. 500,000 to 1 million American casualties is plausible. Conservative, even. Some estimates run high. Japanese casualties, 5 to 10 million dead. Military and civilian combined. Maybe more if the fighting dragged into 1948. That's what didn't happen. That's what 2 atomic bombs prevented. But the debate started almost immediately. Post-war revisionism. Historians questioning whether the invasion would have been as bloody as predicted. Critics claiming casualty estimates were inflated to justify using the bombs. Arguments that Japan was already beaten, that surrender was inevitable, that Truman used nuclear weapons unnecessarily. The evidence says otherwise. The 1.5 million Purple Hearts weren't a bluff. They were manufactured, physical objects, metal struck into medals, placed in boxes, shipped to warehouses. The military doesn't manufacture 1.5 million medals as a propaganda exercise. They manufacture them because they expect to need them. The replacement stream tells the same story. In late 1945, the War Department organized a pipeline to deliver 100,000 replacement troops per month to the Pacific Theater, starting January 1946, continuing through 1947. Sustained reinforcement for an 18-month campaign. The logistics were real. The shipping was scheduled. The training programs were running. The invasion plans weren't hypothetical. General Marshall signed them. Admiral Nimitz signed them. Douglas MacArthur signed them. Ships were being loaded. Divisions were training for amphibious assault. Everything was in motion for November 1st, 1945. The intelligence wasn't fabricated. Ultra intercepts showed Japanese troop levels on Kyushu rising throughout the summer. 350,000 in June, 680,000 in August, 900,000 by mid-August. The numbers were verified through multiple sources: signal intelligence, aerial reconnaissance, captured documents. No senior military leader recommended canceling the invasion before the atomic bombs proved effective. Not Marshall, not MacArthur, not Nimitz, not even Admiral William Leahy, who opposed using the atomic bombs on moral grounds. Leahy thought the bombs were unnecessary because he believed Japan would surrender eventually, but he never argued the invasion itself was unnecessary if Japan didn't surrender. The casualty estimates were real, the planning was real, the horror was real, and Truman knew it. 200,000 Japanese died from the atomic bombs, Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, immediate deaths and radiation casualties over the following months. The number is terrible, horrific, unprecedented in human history. 2 cities obliterated, tens of thousands vaporized in seconds, tens of thousands more dying slowly from radiation poisoning, children, elderly, non-combatants, people who never held a weapon. The moral weight is crushing, but compared to the invasion casualties, it's a fraction. American soldiers saved 500,000 to 1 million lives, men who would have died on beaches at Kyushu, men who would have been killed by kamikaze attacks, men who would have fought block by block through Tokyo, men who came home instead of being buried in military cemeteries. Japanese civilians saved 5 to 10 million lives, civilians who would have fought with bamboo spears and died, civilians who would have committed suicide rather than surrender, civilians killed in American bombing raids that would have continued for 18 more months, civilians starved in a prolonged blockade. No American occupation troops died fighting their way to Tokyo. No Okinawa-style slaughter repeated across the entire Japanese archipelago. No mass civilian suicides on the scale of the home island population. No kamikaze attacks killing thousands of American sailors. The war ended August 14th, 1945. Not mid-1947. Not 1948. 6 days after Nagasaki. The killing stopped. The dying stopped. Truman later wrote about the decision, the burden of it, the weight of ordering the deaths of 200,000 people with 2 bombs. But he never expressed doubt. I regarded the bomb as a military weapon and never had any doubt that it should be used, he said. The alternative was worse, far worse. He chose the smaller number. The Purple Hearts tell the final story. August 1945. The war ends. 495,000 Purple Hearts remain in storage. Nearly 500,000 medals manufactured for an invasion that never happened. And those medals are still being awarded. Korea, 1950 to 1953. American soldiers wounded at Incheon, Chosin Reservoir, Heartbreak Ridge received Purple Hearts struck in 1945. Medals made for Kyushu, awarded for Korea. Vietnam, 1965 to 1973. Marines wounded at Khe Sanh, Hue City, the A Shau Valley, received World War II Purple Hearts. 58,000 American casualties. Not enough to exhaust the 1945 supply. Grenada, Panama, the Gulf War, Somalia, Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan. 80 years of American conflicts, 80 years of casualties, and the military is still distributing Purple Hearts manufactured for Operation Downfall. The year 2000 was the first time new Purple Hearts were ordered since 1945. Only 34,000 were made. The original supply still hasn't run out. A soldier wounded in Fallujah in 2004 might receive a Purple Heart struck in 1945 for an invasion that never came. A Marine injured in Kandahar in 2011 could be wearing a medal made for Kyushu's beaches. Storage facilities across the United States still hold tens of thousands of these medals. Climate-controlled warehouses, cardboard boxes on metal shelves, Each box contains dozens of Purple Hearts. Each medal a wound that was expected, a casualty that was planned for, a sacrifice that was considered acceptable. Those medals are the physical evidence of a sacrifice that didn't have to be made, because 2 bombs ended what 1.5 million medals couldn't. Here's what Operation Downfall tells us about war. War isn't about bravery or glory. It's not about honor or heroism or noble sacrifice. Those things exist, but they're not what war is. War is mathematics, cold, brutal mathematics, equations written in blood. Leaders must make decisions based on those equations. How many die if we choose option A? How many die if we choose option B? Which number is smaller? Truman faced the math. 200,000 dead from atomic bombs versus millions dead from invasion. He chose the smaller number. History judges that choice. People debate whether it was moral, whether it was necessary, whether alternatives existed. The arguments continue 80 years later. But the Purple Hearts don't lie. Every Purple Heart collecting dust in storage is a life that didn't have to be sacrificed, a family that didn't have to grieve, an American soldier who came home, a Japanese civilian who survived. Somewhere in a military warehouse, there's a Purple Heart in a plastic case. The date stamp on the back reads 1945. It's been sitting there for 80 years, waiting for a war that will never come. That medal represents everything Operation Downfall was, and everything it didn't have to be. 1 million casualties that never happened, a sacrifice that wasn't required, a mathematical horror that was solved with 2 bombs instead of 2 years of slaughter. The medal is still there, still waiting, still evidence of the decision that saved millions.